again, for those who are new to After School HQ, just want to give you some quick insight before we kick it over to Ms. Dills, who will be our guest today. So one, we are a CRM company based out of Indiana, which focuses on helping you engage students and parents, providing a centralized tool, and also make it easy to report on the data that goes hand in hand with the impact of your organization. So throughout this call, I will drop a link. This will give you access to actually connect with myself and our team to talk a little bit more about how we can further support you. But we always love hosting phenomenal speakers like Miss Emily today that give you some additional insight outside of what we offer as well. So as I prep to introduce Miss Emily, just giving you a little bit of insight regarding her background. So one, Miss Emily is a pioneering emotional intelligence expert with over 17 years of expertise in educational and youth development. As the creator and innovator of Dual EQ model, Emily has transformed her after-school program approach, social emotional learning, for both staff and students. Her consultatory work spans diverse educational environments where she has helped organizations build sustainable leadership pipeline and enhance program quality through emotional intelligence framework. So we are beyond excited to have Miss Emily with us. So Miss Emily, come on, and the show and the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Marcus. Can everybody hear me okay? If you have your video on, you can just give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. I am so excited to be here today and very, very grateful to get to partner with After School HQ. And I'm even more excited because I see some people I know in this webinar. So if you are one of those people, you know who you are, and much love to all my AYS peeps out there that I see. And I'm excited to connect with some new folks as well. So as Marcus shared, I am Emily. I will share a little bit more about the work that I do and how I came to be where I am today. And because it's a small group, I would really love some interaction from you all also. I recognize if you're driving or if you're listening while eating lunch or all those types of multitasking things and you are unable, that is totally fine. But if you are, please feel free to make this as interactive as possible. Marcus, are they able to come off mute if they want and things like that?
Yeah,
Okay,
yep, yes, ma'am.
great. Great. So with it being a small enough group, we can definitely keep it as interactive as possible as well. I definitely don't want to stand up here or sit up here and talk at you this entire time. So jump in at any time. And if I do ask some questions, please stay engaged if you can, because that helps me kind of hear where you're at and be as responsive as I can be. So it kind of looks like my photos are not showing up. Let me just refresh here. Sorry. Thanks for your
Yeah. And
patience.
as Emily pulls that up, if you do have questions throughout, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. Myself and my team members will be monitoring it as well.
Yes. And Marcus and team, please feel free to interrupt me at any time too. If there are questions that would be good to just share aloud and talk, and you will not hurt my feelings if you interrupt me.
Perfect.
All
Will do.
right. Perfect. So with that, just a big thing about me, and those that know me know that I'm really big on modeling strategies that you can do with your staff in your organization if you are a leader of staff or if you directly work with students. And so I always try to do that right off the bat and just model tools that you can take and apply, whether you're working with adults or kids, and you could apply them today. And one of those being a welcome message that just welcomes the group of people that are coming together. So this group of people is obviously a bunch of adults, but in many of your programs, you have youth coming together each day before and after school. And I love to have a message that welcomes the group and kind of sets the tone for things that you'll be working on that day, exciting events, and also just a way to get them engaging and connecting as quickly as possible, especially in a virtual format. We know that it's really important to be interactive and engaged, and the quicker you can do that as a teacher or a leader or a facilitator, the better, because it keeps everybody engaged the whole time. So I always try to do that within the first 5 to 10 minutes of talking to a group of folks. So A message is a great way to do that because you can kind of share a little bit about what the focus is going to be today and then always end with a question that gets everybody interacting. And then I love to use visuals as well. So I usually ask someone else to read the message, but just to keep the flow going, I'll go ahead and read it for the group. It says, "Good afternoon. I'm excited to connect with each of you today. As you get settled, introduce yourself in the chat, sharing your name, where you are from, and your organization," which many of you have already done. But if you're just now joining, please do that. And then also share which person on the tree you are identifying with today. And if this is something you want to steal and use with your staff or use with your students, please do. This is called a blob tree, and you can literally Google it, and a lot of different images will pop up. And if you have access to slides and projectors and things in your programming, you could have this projected as kids are coming into your program or during a staff meeting. And it's just a great way to check in and see where everybody is at that moment in time. So we're going to model that. So if I tried to zoom in, if you can see the numbers, go ahead and stick in the chat which person you identify with, what number you identify with today. And since it's kind of hard for me to, well, actually, I can't see the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was
I
going to
got
say, Marcus, feel free to share the numbers you're seeing too, and I
Yeah,
will
so
as well.
so Justin let us know 10. Rebecca let us know 10 as well. People really relate there. And then Rashi said 4.
Okay. We've got a 9,
We have a 10 from Celeste.
12. What's 12?
12
Okay.
from Gates. Even a
Yeah.
15. Okay.
So overall, a lot of these are positive. We have a lot of people right in the middle, just kind of ready to take it on. Some people hanging on at the bottom, but still smiling. And 11 and 12 supporting each other on that branch. We've got a 2 helping someone up the tree. Let's see, what's 8? Oh, 8. Okay. So that makes me wonder. So if that was a student that identified as an 8, then that might be a kiddo that I would check in on and kind of say, like, how's it going? How was your day? How can I support you? What do you need right now? Or maybe even just like giving them a hug or a high five. So this is a great way to just like check in on kids and adults, because wherever you're at on this tree is totally okay, but it can give you a lot of information to where people are at. So this gives me a lot of information of where you're at today and how I can meet you where you are and support you. And then also just recognizing that you might be a 10 right now, but maybe later you're a 5 at the bottom of the tree, and all emotions are okay. All emotions are temporary, and it's how we respond to our emotions, which is what's most important. And obviously, in the work that we do with youth, and why you all are here today and prioritizing this work of emotional intelligence. So thanks for sharing that. And that's, again, like, that's a strategy that you could put in your back pocket, that if you're already doing it, great. If you're not already doing it, please steal. I think it's super important for us, and that's why webinars and things like this are so great, is to steal ideas from each other and share and collaborate, so we're not all on our own little island. So having a simple message that just sets the tone for your day, for your program, for your meeting that you're having with staff, and then having some kind of interactive question like that, and then maybe even using a visual also. It's just a great way to get people talking and connecting and having something intentional to talk about. And it's also really informative for you to kind of see where everybody is and know that you can meet them where they're at. So along with those same lines, I'm a really big visual person. So all the things I'm going to be sharing with you today are kind of broken down into these visuals. And this is actually a sales framework that is used in a lot of businesses and corporations to help them market why they do what they do and how they do what they do. And I'm actually going to use this framework to share a little bit more about me and how I came to developing what I call a dual EQ approach. And I'll break down what that means and what that looks like in action and why I'm so passionate about it. And I'm going to use this framework to kind of help tell that story, because stories are engaging and stories connect people. And so hopefully you'll have things that connect with your work and your personal and professional lives. And then might also give you some ideas of things that you can do to apply to your context. So within this story brand framework, there's always a character. The character then meets some type of problem or challenge or adversity. And then they have a guide that supports them through that challenge, gives them a plan, then calls them to action, which results in either success or helps them avoid failure. So I'm going to use that framework to kind of share how I came to develop this EQ framework and what it looks like in the after school space. So starting with the character being me, this is me with a group of kindergartners here in Indianapolis. I was a teacher for 12 years in K-5 education, in a mixture of special education and general education settings. I was a gen ed teacher in almost every grade through the K-5 space, and I was a special education teacher as well through those 12 years. I taught the majority of my teaching career here in Indianapolis, but then I also taught in Southern Indiana for a while. And while I was in Southern Indiana, I got my master's from Butler University in educational leadership and did a lot of research around positive behavior supports in schools, and just really became passionate about that work. And all of my research for my master's thesis was around how we look at behavior like we look at academics, because at that time, Indiana had a model called RTI, response to intervention, which now is called MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. And I felt like as a teacher, we had a pretty clear structure of how we were supporting kids with academics through that tiered approach. But I didn't feel like we had a very clear structure on how to support kids with behavior. And as a special education teacher, I was seeing that firsthand, where many students, in my opinion, were being pushed out of classrooms and over-identified with special needs, specifically related to their behavior. And I was struggling to support them and also advocate for them to be included in their general education setting. So I became really passionate about that, did a lot of research around how we can look at behavior through the same type of framework that we look at academics. And that at that time, it wasn't necessarily called social emotional learning, but we had a lot of things in place like PBIS and classroom management strategies. And then SEL kind of came on board and gave us this idea that we can actually teach behavior skills, and behavior skills can be learned and reinforced and encouraged in positive ways versus just punishing kids and shaming and blaming them, or over identifying them with special needs. And so that work led me to become a social emotional learning coach for 8 elementary schools here in Indianapolis. And I did that work for 4 years, and it really became what I would say my life's work. And I'm extremely, extremely passionate about that. So I got to support classrooms in implementing social emotional learning curriculum. And I also got a lot of experience working with teachers, and started to realize very quickly that we can support kids all day long. And of course, kids need those supports. But what I felt like was lacking and was even more so a need were supporting the adults. And we all know that when the adults aren't well, they can't be their best versions of themselves for their students. And so I really started pouring more and more into the adults that I was working with, but honestly felt stretched really thin, supporting so many schools and Then I decided to work in administration. So I thought, well, maybe if I'm just at one school, I'll be able to go deeper with teachers and students and families. And so I was an assistant principal for a little bit. And of course, COVID happened. And in Indiana, social emotional learning kind of became under fire. And I started to realize that I felt like I was defending this work more than I had ever before, and that really just didn't sit well with what I believed. And I really believed in prioritizing this work in schools, and felt like, unfortunately, for many reasons, it was becoming prioritized less and less because we were so focused on the academic skill gaps of students post-COVID, even though we knew that behavior was even more of a need, and mental well-being was even more of a need after COVID. I firmly believe that it wasn't because of COVID, but COVID definitely exacerbated it for us. And we saw it firsthand happening in schools, kids really struggling and adults really struggling. And I see in the chat, Marcus put, who all can relate to burnout, right? And so I started to become really burned out as a school administrator, trying to support teachers and students and their families. And so that's a little bit about me, the character, and what the problem was that I faced within this story was that the schools I was working in within the school day felt like they were on fire. I felt like I was putting out fires all day long as an assistant principal. And even though I knew that behavior supports were the number one priority in what my values are as an educator, sometimes I didn't feel like they were the priorities of everyone within the system. And that just really didn't sit well with me. So I started exploring, where kids are outside of school. Kids are in after school programs. Kids are in sports programs. Kids are in faith-based organizations. Kids are in clubs. Kids are at home in their own communities or in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, camp programs. And so I started realizing that maybe I can make an impact in a bigger way in the out of school time space. So now as a consultant, I work full time for myself and I get to work with schools, but I also get to work with a lot of after school or what we call out of school time providers. So those are those before and after school programs, camp programs, sports programs, anything like that that is outside of the school day. And I've been really welcomed in this space, and I'm super grateful for that because I truly believe that the out of school time space really does prioritize the social emotional needs of children and also the social emotional well-being of the adults that are serving those children. But I also recognize that there still are a lot of challenges facing this industry, which is why I'm very grateful to get to be a part of this community and help support that work because schools are on fire, but so are many of our out of school time providers feel like that they are on fire as well. And so I hope that I can just be a small piece of the puzzle in that, which leads me to kind of the guide here. So in that story brand framework, the guide is kind of positioned as like an actual person. But for me, in my journey, as I was realizing that schools were on fire and that I didn't feel like the social emotional well-being of students and adults was really the number one priority, unfortunately, the guide for me was understanding what emotional intelligence is. And I use the term emotional intelligence and EQ interchangeably because I feel like because we can get caught up a lot in the language, whether it's SEL or EQ or soft skills or career readiness skills, employability skills. There are so many terms for this concept. The reason I have started to say emotional intelligence and EQ the most is because I feel like it's a little bit more widely recognized in the corporate world, in the education world. At the end of the day, most people agree that these are skills that are important. They are important for kids, they are important for adults. And they're all skills that we're all constantly learning and growing, and that we're never going to be 100% perfect in all of these areas because we're human beings. These are human skills, but they're some of the hardest skills to actually teach because they're not as concrete as just teaching a math equation or how to read words with silent E at the end and all that good stuff that we have really structured frameworks around for academics. We don't have as many structured frameworks around this. And so the term EQ is broken down into these 4 elements: self-awareness, recognizing your own emotions, understanding how they influence your actions, and just really focused around like understanding yourself. How am I showing up in this moment? What is my identity? What are my values? What's my mission? Why am I here? So self-awareness is really just reflecting on who you are. The next component is self-regulation, managing emotions in a healthy way and adapting to changing circumstances. The third one being empathy, understanding other people's emotions, offering comfort and support. And then the last one being social skills, maintaining and building relationships and effective communication. So the other reason why I've landed on the term EQ to use the most is because it's broken down into these 4 pretty simple concepts that whether you're a 5-year-old or a 55-year-old, you can apply this to your life for the most part. The reasons I have the words caught and taught here is because I believe that all of these skills have to be caught and taught. Caught meaning they will be learned through life organically. You're going to catch on to these things. These skills are going to be caught as you learn and grow and have experiences and make mistakes, and meet people along the way. These are all things that we learn. However, we can't just rely on them being caught. They also have to be intentionally taught. Just like reading, kids don't just naturally learn how to read. They have to be taught specific reading strategies. It's the same with EQ. So we are going to naturally catch on to these skills, but then we're also going to intentionally teach self-awareness, teach self-regulation, teach empathy, and teach social skills. So moving into the plan. So for me, I think about this like a stair step, and I think about 2 sides of the stairwell. Like I said, I feel like we're pretty good with prioritizing why emotional intelligence skills are important for kids. I don't think there's anybody here that would disagree how important it is for kids to learn all of these skills. However, we also know that adults are learners also. And when the adults aren't well, they can't be their best for the students they are serving. So I think it's really important to think about both sides of this staircase. And that's where I say it has to be a dual EQ approach. So on the youth side, that looks like intentional teaching of EQ skills through our programming. So I know there's some folks on here that I work with that in their after school program, they have intentional time that they teach, and they call them SEL lessons. You can call them SEL, you can call them EQ, whatever you want to call it, whatever's most respected or accepted in your community, I think is totally fine. But intentionally spending time at least once a week to carve out intentional lessons where kids are learning these skills and getting to practice them. Not in the moment when they're upset, from a different time where we're actually teaching it, and they can hopefully apply it to those real life situations. But at times it might not be totally in the moment every single time, and that's okay too. So having that intentional time where they're talking about ways that they manage their emotions, ways they can ask others to play, ways they can have empathy for others, ways they can explore their own identity, all those types of things. And having intentional curriculum, for lack of a better word. I don't really love the word curriculum because sometimes that feels like worksheets and a packaged kind of program approach. But I know many of your programs have amazing curriculum that you use. And so, whatever it is you use, I just think it's really important that you're setting aside intentional time at least once a week to teach these skills in isolated lesson type formats that are still really fun, that can still get kids up and moving, that can be game based. Kids can create things, all that good stuff, but it has to be intentional and it has to be explicit. Now, kids are also learning it organically by playing on the playground, by playing board games, by having to wait in a line, by sharing a toy with a friend. All that good stuff is also happening in your program, but having the intentional time to teach it is also super and super important. So on the adult side, it's the same way. The adult staff in your programs are learning all of those EQ skills just by being a member of your organization and having experiences using their emotional regulation, using their social skills when they're sending an email, when they're talking to a parent, when they're listening to a child. They're learning all those things organically and growing also. But we also have to have intentional time carved out for the adults also. So, in the framework that I've created with the programs that I work with, the ways that we do that, because it's obviously different for adults than it is for kids. We're not going to sit a group of adults together in a circle and teach them a lesson like we would students. However, we can think about it through an adult friendly approach. So, what I do is I will work with organizations and I will do a staff wide professional development that is just kind of a really broad overview on what is emotional intelligence, why is it so important in the after school space, how does it apply to their lives, just some really like baseline EQ kind of one on one foundational things. And then from there, I will share with the organization that my suggestion is then starting with a small group of staff members that either A, want to go deeper in this work, B, are new staff members to your organization, and so need additional support anyway, just because they're new staff. Or C, maybe they are kind of a hotspot in your organization. Maybe it's a really transient population. Maybe there's been some tension or some turmoil within the program or the community. We all know that we have just a few hotspots within our organization that just kind of struggle a little bit more than others and have different challenges. And so I always share with organizations that it has to be something, though, that group of folks are bought into and see why this is so important for their site. So it could be a variety of, the new, the willing, or the areas where there's just some challenges and in need of support. And so what I do there is then we take a smaller group of staff members and a smaller group of sites, and I will do more intensive support with that group. And we call it a cohort. So it's a group of 5, 6 smaller sites. And I will do one-on-one coaching with those sites. I will come out and physically do curriculum with their students, and then the staff will get to observe or get to co-teach with me. I will also just be an extra set of hands at their program, so their staff can see that I'm in it with them and I'm willing to do the work and just be an extra set of hands sometimes, because I know that that is a huge need too. And so I'll work with a smaller group. We'll meet once a month as a group, and then I'll be supporting them individually along the way. And then from there, we're able to see a lot more growth for the adults, and they also have community within each other to be able to kind of share ideas and see what's working in some spots and what's not working in other spots, and not feel so alone. And essentially, that's kind of a curriculum for adults in learning these skills, without it being so, sit down and I'm going to lecture you and tell you, why you need these skills. So that's kind of the plan. So it has to be done at the same time, though. I think, like I said, we're pretty good about doing this for kids and why it's so important for kids, but we're not always pouring into the adults as much. And it's not because we don't think it's important. It's just because sometimes it can feel like a nice to have versus a need to have. And we're just so busy putting out all those fires that we just need to make sure that we have staff hired in programs, and keeping kids safe and doing all this great work for the kids, but maybe not pouring as much into the adults. And so I think in a perfect world, this stair step approach would focus on youth and adults at the same time. So I kind of already shared this, but this gives a better visual of what this looks like. So like I said, I start with, some bigger sessions of professional development for programs. So if you're an after school program that has, say 12 sites at schools across your community, I often come into programs and I will do sessions with, all of those staff, maybe in the summer as like a back to school kickoff or a mid-year session or different things like that. Or I might be a breakout session in a conference that they have and they can attend and things like that. So that's a way that I kind of get to have touch points with a variety of staff. And then from there, we select those smaller groups and I have curriculum that I can help them with in supporting their youth that they serve. And then I also have the coaching curriculum and the community support of the small group of adults. So that just kind of shares like of how this looks through both the lanes, the youth side and the adult side. So going back to the story brand framework, why is this important and what are the results? So what I have noticed that with the organizations that I have worked with, I have spent a lot of time supporting the youth in their programs and helping develop social emotional learning curriculum for their programs. But the challenge I often have seen is that when I come to support the site in implementing the curriculum, there are so many other challenges that they are facing in regards to staffing, in regards to student behavior, parent relationships, that they often maybe don't either see the need or just don't have time to really prioritize that work. And so I've started to reflect on that a lot and think about, well, maybe the pain point isn't necessarily, being able to implement the curriculum. Maybe that's not where they're at right now. Maybe the bigger pain point is just making sure that they have quality staff at their programs to even be able to implement that. So it's less about the quality of your program, which is what I've spent the majority of my career supporting schools and after school programs to do. And it's more about just the retention of staff, of just being able to have staff in your programs to begin with, because you can't implement any kind of curriculum and you can't work on your own EQ if you don't even have enough people in your program to be able to support your kids and stay within ratio. So the results behind this is that if you are pouring into the EQ of your staff and your students at the same time, you're growing high quality staff that will want to stay in your organization and thrive in your organization into leadership roles. Because I know that's something that this industry is really challenged with, is that we don't pay people enough. Many of our employees are part-time and or don't have benefits. And so they're always moving on to bigger and better opportunities for them. And the hope is that you can keep them within your organization and grow them within your organization. So my bigger goal through this dual EQ framework, going back to that stair step, is that if we are supporting young kids at the bottom of this stairwell, our K-5 elementary kids, and we're also supporting the adults that serve them, as they move up these stairs, what happens when they get to middle school? They usually drop off of your programs, right? Because you either A, don't serve middle school kids, or B, middle school kids can stay home on their own, or they're starting to get involved in other extracurricular activities like sports and clubs and things like that. Then when they get into high school, they're even busier. They usually have a part-time job or a work-based learning internship, or they're caring for younger siblings, or they're just becoming disengaged in the school setting or the after-school setting. So my big goal for this to really support the HR side of retention of high quality staff that can thrive in our organizations and move into leadership roles is that what would happen if we took a case study of a K-5 elementary student that is in one of your programs and is exposed to this dual EQ approach where they have curriculum in their after school setting, and so is the adult that is supporting them is also working on their own EQ to really provide this rich experience for them in after school. Say they're a fourth grader and they're having an amazing experience at your program, and they might also start to be learning that they really love working with kids and they really look up to the after school leaders at your site, and they don't want to leave when they become a middle schooler. So what do we do with them? So I would love to have and this is where when we open it up to questions and conversation here soon, I would love to hear also if other people are doing things similar. But my hope is that we keep that young fourth grader until they're in fifth grade. And then when they move into the middle school space, what opportunities can we provide them to be kind of a junior counselor or to have an internship or a work-based learning experience in your after school program where they are still getting all these EQ skills through your curriculum, through your programming, but they are also starting to move into that leadership role, even just as a middle schooler. So how could they be partnered with a small group? How could they lead some of these EQ and SEL activities and start mentoring younger kids? So that's going to keep them engaged in your program. And then also lead into high school. In Indiana, we have new graduation pathways right now that requires students to earn a seal for their diploma that requires them to have experiences to either go directly into employment post-graduation, go directly to enroll into a university, or to enlist. And so to get that seal, they have to have different credentials that provide them opportunities for whatever path they're planning and hoping to take post-graduation. So if their path is employment and enrollment or enrollment in a university, I think there are lots of opportunities we could do with high school work-based learning or part-time work and after-school programs that, again, is still giving them access to a very safe, healthy, and supportive learning environment that is growing their EQ skills. And it's also giving them opportunities to become these adults on this other side of the stairwell that might want to work full-time in our organizations. So that way, we're kind of training them from the bottom up as young students in K-5, middle school helpers and mentors, high school part-time workers or work-based learning experiences, and then maybe becoming full-time staff or maybe going into a university where they want to work in youth development. And that way we are not constantly looking for new people to hire and then feeling like we have to start from the very bottom of the stairwell. So my hope is that through this dual EQ approach, we are not only creating great after-school programs, but we are also hitting that main pain point, which feels like the biggest need right now, which is just keeping staff. So the goal is employee retention is not preventing people from leaving. Employee retention is giving them reasons to stay. And how are we looking at some of our youngest children as possible employees in our organizations that can thrive and eventually lead our organizations as adults? And so the hope is that the results of this approach and that framework, that story brand framework says, you know, the character in the story either finds success or avoids failure. And so the two ways I see this going, the success being when we pour into the EQ of our staff and our students, everyone benefits. And then the avoiding failure side is that this increases our program quality and allows both adults and children to thrive. So we don't constantly feel like we're putting out fires. So lastly, before we open it up to questions here at the end, like I shared, I would love to connect with other after school and out of school time providers to implement this approach, to collect more data, to see what could happen to our programs if we intentionally focused on these skills through explicit teaching, coaching of staff, curriculum for students, and being consistent with it. I understand that when you're in the weeds in your organization, you wear so many hats and you're doing so many things and trying to juggle it all. And that's why I share with organizations that I can be a third party, unbiased perspective that can come in and support you along the way. So you don't feel like it's all up to you and that, you know, this is another thing added to your plate. I would love to partner with you and think about how I can support you within that and be that extra set of hands for you, not only for your students, but also for the adults. So ways that you can connect with me are all on this slide right here. My email address is just emily@emilydills.com. I have a website that shares more about the work that I'm doing. And then just social media as well. I'm old, so I'm not on TikTok and all that good stuff, but I am on the millennial platforms, and I share a lot about the work that I'm doing in schools and after school programs and also at universities. And also just share my own life as a mom and how I'm learning along the way and developing my own EQ as a parent. So please connect with me through any of these platforms and reach out. And I'd love to learn more about your program and how I can support you. So I hope to be in touch, but I will stop there because I feel like even though I said I wanted this to be interactive, I've pretty much been talking the whole time. But hopefully this gives us enough time then to open up the floor, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or also just share ideas too, because I'm sure you're doing a lot of this great work already. And so I'd love to hear, you know, some other things that are happening and answer any questions.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Emily. I just followed you on Instagram as well, so definitely looking forward to
Nice.
seeing the journey. But you touched on so much. You talked a little bit about, the importance of backfilling the staff, the succession plans, the emotional intelligence, all and burnout all together. So now we truly appreciate you. Had me reflecting on my camp counselor, Miss Jennifer, who inspired me to get in this work years ago. So I love it. I love it. Thank you for taking some time to chat with us. We do want to open up the chat now. So if individuals do have questions, this is the time for us to be able to make sure we are able to get those answered for you as well. So again, please feel free to put your question in the chat, or you can actually come off mute if you would like to go ahead and engage and ask Miss Emily. I'm Miss Debbie. I see you're talking, but I'm not able to hear you, ma'am. You can feel free to put it in the chat if that would be more helpful too, and I'm happy to answer. Or go ahead and read it. Awesome. So while she does that, Miss Emily, one thing I just want to ask for you to give a little bit more clarity, just insight on. Can you tell us a success story of maybe one of the organizations you work with and how you were truly able to make the impact? So you're on mute, Miss Emily.
Thank you. Sorry. And that's where I hope Miss Debbie can actually come off mute, because Miss Debbie is one of the organizations that I work with. And I would love to either tap on her, or I see Karen here, and some other folks at AYS to maybe share what this has looked like at AYS. I can share, but I would love to hear more from their perspective of how they've experienced it. Debbie, are you
Can
able
you
to
hear
come
me?
off mute?
We
Yeah.
can hear you. Yes, ma'am.
I think it was my headphones. I think that's what it was. Well, I have two things. So my one question was, so I mean, Emily, you know our system and how we do this. So with me, with being short staffed and trying to create an environment to where I can retain, then have a turnover. If I am short staffed to where I am not able to fully be available or be there in that moment, how do you suggest I do that to help
Mm-hmm.
to help build those quality people, but yet I'm not physically able to. I mean, Karen can be a testament to this because Karen's one of my staff. And it's like I would love to come up and be like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We have this plan, and then I'm everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I try to do like one-on-ones with my team. Um, and then sometimes that is even lacking because I'm more of like I want to see you, I want to see the program, I want to see how we can make it better. So how would you suggest that I would do that to help retain those people if I physically can't be available?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I have a lot of thoughts, and I know you and I have talked about this before. And so I know it's not like a magic wand perfect situation by any means. But one thing I would say is, specifically in your school district, you guys have a great relationship with the high school, and you have several high school students that work part-time with you or in a work-based learning, opportunity. And so I know this is not like an immediate fix to the challenge, but I think a proactive approach is, how are we being forward thinking to keep those high school students and be growing them? Even though I know within ratio they can't be with students by themselves, but what are some things that we can delegate to them to help them start growing their leadership EQ skills that help them want to stay at AYS and then could be future YDAs and YDLs? That's like the long-term plan, that pipeline of how to like keep them and grow them. Even if they go to college and they come back for breaks, and like we can still like work with them in a part-time way. And then also like partnership with college students. I know you have a couple college students as well. And so like that's like the long game, but like the immediate thought, I mean, one thing that I've really tried to provide for your school system is for me to be that extra person, because I know you can't. So we're both running around trying to support everybody. And Karen is a great testament of this as well, because there are people like Karen who will reach out, and her and I can chat over the phone, and I can support her without having to physically be there, or we can hop on a call when she needs things. But as you know, there are some people who maybe don't reach out. And so how can we support them also without having to physically be there? So I think staying consistent with those one-on-ones, even if it's just once a month, and having that intentional time where you can build a relationship with them, you can let them feel heard and let them know that it's okay to share the things that they're struggling with, because if they don't share, you don't always know how you can support them. And that's what we did with our small groups. Even though, we only met once a month, we had that protected time as a group for everybody to come together and meet. And even if you're just meeting virtually, it's better than not meeting at all, and staying as consistent with that as possible. I know worst case scenario is when you don't have enough staff, that you have to put kids in bigger groups, and then you're not as able to do as much quality programming. But I think, again, that's another way you can use those part-time staff, those high school students, those college students, to not necessarily like, be on their own with kids, but to support kids in intentional ways, and making sure that they know what their role is in that.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you
Clear
for
as
that.
mud, right?
Great way to get some additional bandwidth. Kieran, I see your hand and I saw your comment as well.
I just want to say thanks to both of their wonderful ideas. We started something new here and it's really been, this is week 2 of it. So far it's really been great. Hopefully it will be long term. But we do have a lot of staff that, which is why I asked that question, that is not here like other than when the students are here. So it's really hard to prep them on activities, show them how they're going to teach this, explain what the hard points are. And Miss Debbie has been in a few times and she's always telling me, I wish we recorded that. I wish we had pictures of that. I wish we would. So I kind of reached out some of the principals I know within our school here. We've got 2, which is wonderful, and one vice principal, which she's wonderful too. And I was like, I need ideas. How do I balance this and get my older kids involved that are getting a little bit bored? Can you give me some suggestions? And what I've come up with from their suggestions and talking to Miss Debbie and talking to Miss Emily is we are doing a Friday newsletter. This will be our second week working at it. We haven't gotten it together yet. The first was organizing it, but it's going to be our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students that are going to take turns being photographers. They're going to report on what has happened during the week. They're going to do video snippet recordings so we can even send those in. And they're going to put together like what we want to share with the rest of the school and with their parents about what we did here.
I love that, Karen. What a great way to develop that leadership role and also get kids excited about something different. So that's awesome.
Yeah, great testimony. We appreciate you sharing, Karen. Now, Celeste had a question as well. She mentioned, how do partnerships look? I've never partnered, but I've been interested. Due to being so overprotective of her program, as a lot of us are, she hasn't. So, can you give her a little bit more insight on what that would look like?
Yeah. Yeah. And I totally understand that. And I think that that's like the negative and the positive of this is that you do want to be protective of your program. However, there's so many assets and opportunities in your community. And a lot of times people are doing similar work, but we're kind of doing it all in isolation. So why not work smarter, not harder? So some approaches that I currently am working on with folks is partnering with a local high school, because we know that most states have some type of graduation requirement that is requiring experiences for kids outside of the school setting. So if you can partner with your local high school that has a class or a group of students that is interested in child development, education, youth work, anything kind of related to what your program does. And even if you just start small with 1 or 2 students, bringing them on board and really wrapping around them and thinking about them as also like students in your program, even though they are older students, but thinking about how your program is extending your impact to not only the young kids that you serve, but the older kids also, but then creating those work-based learning opportunities that is helping grow that employee pipeline. So that's one approach, which would, in my mind, be kind of like the lowest hanging fruit, is partnering with your local high school within the school district. But I would also say colleges and universities within your community also. Here in Indianapolis, where we are, I teach pre-service teachers at IU Indy. That's actually where I'm at today. And I also teach at Butler. And then we have Ivy Tech here. We have Marion College. We have so many different 4 and 2-year universities within our community. So partnering with a college that might have a class that is dedicated to youth development, then could require service learning hours or work-based learning hours within your program. So that's another opportunity. I would also say faith-based organizations is another one that would be a great opportunity to partner with. And then knowing that like middle school and high school kids get really busy and we're kind of competing for their time, maybe also partnering with a sports team. So if it's a basketball team that wants to do some outreach in your community and could have some service learning hours at your programming, I mean, how cool would that be for, young elementary kids to get to learn not only about basketball maybe, but EQ skills from a high school basketball student? I mean, I know that kids would be way more engaged in that from a high school basketballer than they would from me as an old lady teaching them that lesson. So those are some ideas, but I would just like look within your community and just find like, one strong relationship and start there.
Awesome. Great insight, Emily. Thank you sincerely. I definitely see those years of knowledge and insight in the field coming through without a doubt. Well, I know we're just about at time. So, Miss Emily, again, thank you for sharing the information. For everybody who joined us today, again, we will be blasting this out in the form of a recap email, so you'll have all Miss Emily's information to stay connected. But again, we thank you sincerely for taking some time to connect with us, and hope you have a great rest of your day, team. So we look forward to connecting with you here soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.